The King is out on Netflix now, the period piece starring Timothée Chalamet, Joel Edgerton, Robert Pattinson, and Sean Harris. It is based partly on real history and partly on the plays by William Shakespeare, and tells the story of King Henry V of England, or rather the story of his ascension to the throne and him changing from a carefree prince into a full-fledged king. So the story opens when Henry IV is still alive, although quite ill and almost on his deathbed. Prince Hal, despite being the older son, is not considered for succession. He has a strained relationship with his father, lives outside the royal court, and spends his days mostly drinking and sleeping and dicking around. However, the younger son gets killed in battle, and so, willing or not, Hal steps up to take the crown and become Henry V. He comes in immediately clashing with the clergy and some of the court members by making it extremely clear that he is not his father. He intends to wrap up civil unrest in Wales and Scotland, not by continued military operations as his father did, but rather by diplomacy, as he would prefer to have a peaceful rule instead of another violent one. However, very soon after he becomes king, he is pressured to go to war with France, at first because of signs of disrespect from the continent, which Henry doesn't consider strong enough justification. But later, he is informed of an assassination plot against him and even some of his friends conspiring to depose him at the request of France's king. So he finally decides enough is enough and starts the campaign. Now, the most important factor in examining the movie is how you will look at it, how you will treat it, because it can be seen as two different things, I think. One, the more obvious, is a historical epic, depicting a violent period in history and real historical people. And if you choose to view it as that, and like to see accurate history on film, then I'm afraid the movie will disappoint. It condenses a lot of the story, so what actually took years happens over months in the film. Some events are changed, some are made up completely. The characterization of some people is not that accurate. And the character of Falstaff, Henry's most loyal companion and friend, is completely fictional. It's taken from the Shakespeare play. When it comes to technicalities, the armor, the swordplay, the horses, the look and feel of the period, I think it's much better. With my limited knowledge, I'd still say the movie takes some liberties, but overall I thought it does a good job of recreating the early 15th century. But as I've said, because it is quite frivolous with the storyline, you cannot in good conscience call it a good historical epic. Thing is, I'm not sure you should. You see, for me, the film is using the setting and the events to tell a much more personal story, to be a character study of Henry, to examine how he has to change because of his position, how he is able to cling to some of his philosophy and morals, but gradually has to abandon some of it, some other parts of it, and how he becomes a different person essentially because of the circumstances and the pressures and the events that happen to him over the course of the film. And at that, I thought that The King does a pretty good job. It helps when you have a brilliant actor like Chalamet as your lead. As always, he's excellent, especially with his facial acting. You can read a lot of his thoughts from just his expressions. Now, I do think he was slightly miscast in terms of his physique. The way that other characters refer to him, you would imagine that Henry V was a much more imposing and, physically basically bigger person, a taller guy, much more fearsome warrior, but he makes up for it with his acting ability, I thought. Another standout is Robert Pattinson. He plays the French prince that is just a massive, complete asshole throughout the film and continues to taunt Henry in various ways, including speaking English with this ridiculous, overblown French accent. He definitely steals every scene he's in and is very entertaining. And I know some people still dislike Robert Pattinson for his stint with the Twilight movies, but he has actually proven to be a very capable actor in the meanwhile, with movies like The Rover or Good Time. He's supposed to play in Tenet next year and in the new Batman incarnation as well. And this year still, he is the star of The Lighthouse, the new black and white horror film. So he's had an interesting career post Twilight, and I think it's interesting to see how that develops and how he manages to continuously prove that he is actually a very capable actor. Back to The King, I also quite liked how the film looked. There are several wide shots in in the film that looked absolutely gorgeous. My favorite scene was probably the execution of traitors, and this whole siege sequence with three trebuchets firing at a castle, with multiple shots of that happening at dusk or during the night. So overall, it is a pleasant film to watch, quite engaging and interesting story-wise. And at the end of the day, I guess the reception, as I said, comes down to how accepting you will be in regards to sacrificing historical accuracy for a clearer character arc and character-driven plot. For me, it worked.